Picture this. There's a high school in Chicago that completely flipped the script on graduation requirements. If a student failed a class, they didn't just get a giant red F on their report card. No. Instead, they received a grade of not yet. I mean, just think about the absolute power of that perspective shift. A failing grade basically screams, I'm nothing, I'm nowhere, but not yet. That tells you you're simply on a learning curve. It literally builds a bridge into your future. It reframes this massive soul-crushing obstacle from a permanent defeat into, well, just a temporary roadblock. Pretty amazing, right? And that high school's approach perfectly captures one of the absolute biggest psychological concepts of our time, the growth mindset. Coined by psychologist Carol Dweck, this idea has spread like wildfire, completely reshaping education, corporate leadership, and how we approach personal development over the last few decades. But, as this idea has exploded in popularity, it's also been deeply misunderstood. It's been misapplied, and honestly, recently it's been pretty rigorously debated by academic researchers. So in this explainer, we're cutting through the buzzwords, we're going to dive into the real science behind the growth mindset, look at some valid criticisms of how it's being taught, and most importantly, figure out how you can actually authentically apply it to your own life. All right, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. First, the two mindsets. Second, the fixed mindset trap. Third, the neuroscience of growth. Then, the intervention illusion. After that, mindsets in business. And finally, your path forward. Kicking things off with Section 1, the two mindsets, looking at the core theory.
So what exactly are we talking about here? At its core, a growth mindset is the belief that your basic qualities, your intelligence, your talents, they aren't carved in stone. They're things you can actively cultivate. It's the idea that the hand you're dealt at birth is really just the starting line, not the finish line. Now, I have to point out a super common misconception. A lot of people think a growth mindset just means trying really, really hard. But as Carol Dweck herself points out, effort is only one piece of the puzzle. It's also about trying totally new strategies, seeking out input from others when you're stuck, and focusing heavily on the actual process of learning. It's having this fundamental belief that, yes, improvement is physically and mentally possible for you.
Moving right along to Section 2, the fixed mindset trap, or proving versus improving.
Now, let's contrast that with the fixed mindset. If you truly believe you only have a set amount of intelligence or talent, well, your primary motivation suddenly becomes proving that you have enough of it, right? You get hyper-focused on looking smart, looking capable, and avoiding absolutely anything that might expose a weakness. You're just constantly trying to prove yourself. But a growth mindset? That flips the script to improving yourself. Think about it. Why waste all that energy constantly proving how great you are when you could actually be getting better? The fixed mindset basically dodges challenges just to protect the ego, but the growth mindset actively stretches for improvement. It views setbacks not as some permanent condemnation of who you are, but as incredibly vital feedback.
There's this quote from the source material that really hits the nail on the head regarding just how exhausting this fixed mindset trap truly is. Imagine walking through life where literally every single obstacle, every meeting at work, every test you take, is evaluated as this massive, high-stakes threat to your core identity. Asking yourself constantly, will I look smart or dumb? Will I succeed or fail? It's completely draining. When your self-worth is so tightly tied to these static traits, one single failure can feel completely devastating because in your mind, it defines you. The fixed mindset is just a world of constant threats and defenses.
Let's pivot to Section 3, the neuroscience of growth, where we dig into the actual brain science.
Now, what's really fascinating here is a study published in the journal NPJ Science of Learning. It revealed something incredible. Researchers took kids aged 7 to 10 and put them through a 4-week cognitive tutoring program that focused on math skills. And they didn't just stand there and lecture them about what a growth mindset is. They gave them a structured environment to actually practice cognitive skills. And the results? No joke, the training significantly enhanced the children's growth mindset. And this was especially true for the kids who started with lower baseline scores. Basically, by engaging in a supportive process of actual learning, their underlying belief in their own capability physically shifted. Their mindset literally changed as a byproduct of targeted, supported cognitive effort. And here's the kicker. The researchers could actually see this happening in the kids' brains using functional MRI scans. They found that gaining a growth mindset was associated with increased neural response and connectivity in 3 key areas. First, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which handles cognitive control and error monitoring. Then the striatum, which is basically the motivation and reward center. And finally, the hippocampus, the brain's hub for learning and memory. When students who have a growth mindset make a mistake or face a challenge, These corticostriatal circuits literally light up. Their brains are basically on fire with that power of not yet we talked about earlier. They actively process the mistake so they can learn from it, instead of just shutting down and running away, which is what a fixed mindset brain tends to do. Which brings us to Section 4, the intervention illusion, taking a hard look at real-world challenges. Okay, so as much as we love the idea of the growth mindset, we have to look at the other side of the coin. A massive systematic review and meta-analysis published in the Psychological Bulletin took a highly critical look at real-world growth mindset interventions in schools. And honestly, their findings were pretty sobering. They found that out in the wild, positive results were actually pretty rare and often clouded by poor study design. For example, did a specific intervention actually teach a growth mindset, or did it just tell kids to work harder? A lot of times it was impossible to tell. The researchers noted a frequent lack of proper checks to see if the intervention even changed the students' mindsets in the first place. Plus, the review pointed out that significant positive results were disproportionately reported by authors who had financial incentives, while null effects, where nothing happened, were sometimes spun to look significant. So it's a vital, completely neutral reminder for us. Scaling psychological interventions is incredibly difficult, and we absolutely have to demand rigorous evidence. And this brilliantly illustrates a point that Carol Dweck herself had been loudly making over the last few years. She noticed this outbreak of what she calls the false growth mindset. This happens when well-meaning educators wrongfully praise mere effort, even if the kid isn't actually learning a single thing, just to protect their self-esteem. As Dweck explicitly warns, the growth mindset was intended to help close achievement gaps, not hide them. Right? If a student is failing, you don't just pat them on the back and say, "Oh, great effort." No, you say, "Okay, let's talk about what you've tried, and let's figure out what new strategy we can use next." The goal has to be actual learning, not just handing out a participation trophy. All right, let's switch gears a bit for Section 5, Mindsets in Business, focusing on corporate culture. So how does all this actually look in practice outside the classroom? Well, mindsets dictate an organization's culture just as much as they dictate individual performance. A fixed mindset workplace is almost always driven by this deep fear of failure, and that results in low trust, siloed communication where departments literally don't even talk to each other, and a culture that is incredibly risk-averse simply because mistakes are punished. But in contrast, a growth mindset workplace, that's built on a foundation of psychological safety. You've got high trust, open sharing of ideas, and a genuine embrace of change. In those environments, failures aren't used as weapons to assign blame. They're analyzed constructively as diagnostic tools so everyone can figure out how to improve. Look at how this translates to real corporate strategy. Take Microsoft, for example. Under CEO Satya Nadella, he famously shifted the entire company from this incredibly competitive know-it-all culture into a highly collaborative learn-it-all culture. And that shift unlocked massive innovation in spaces like cloud computing and AI. Companies like Spotify and Airbnb do this too, building cross-functional teams that completely dismantle traditional hierarchies. Another really amazing practical step we've seen is the implementation of monthly failure resumes. This is where teams regularly get together and share their professional challenges and exactly what they've learned from their mistakes. It actively normalizes vulnerability and proves to the whole team that the company values continuous learning way more than some illusion of static perfection. But, and this is a big but, as entrepreneur Vusi Thembekwayo points out, adopting this mindset requires the right context. He notes that, you can try your hardest to have a growth mindset, but if you're trapped in an environment of scarcity, your mindset is still going to be severely limited by that environment. To truly unlock a growth mindset, he says you have to literally force yourself into environments of abundance. You have to ask yourself, are you actively surrounding yourself with people who understand what is potentially possible? Or are you stuck with people who are only looking at what's been achieved in the past? Bringing it all home now with Section 6, your path forward, and some actionable steps. So the crucial point here is this. True growth requires some radical honesty. First off, you have to accept that you are a mixture of both fixed and growth mindsets. I mean, we all are. If we pretend we only ever have a growth mindset, we just fall right back into that trap of the false mindset. Second, you've got to learn to identify your personal fixed mindset triggers. Does getting criticism make you super defensive? Does seeing someone else succeed make you a little envious? Hey, don't worry, it happens to literally all of us. But the key is to notice those feelings and actively work through them. Third, remember that just exerting sheer effort without trying a new strategy is basically just spinning your wheels in the mud. And finally, treat every summit you reach as just the next location to learn from, not the final destination. Because the reality is, you don't just declare that you have a growth mindset and then you're suddenly done. As Carol Dweck reminds us, it is a continuous journey.
It's making a daily commitment to catch yourself in those inevitable moments of self-doubt and reframing them. It's the quiet, ongoing process of choosing the uncomfortable path of learning over the incredibly comfortable illusion of already knowing everything.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. What is one fixed mindset trigger in your life right now, and how are you going to overcome it today? I'd absolutely love to hear about it, so please share your experiences with your own growth mindset in the comments below. And hey, if you found this explainer valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more insights into personal and professional development. Oh, and definitely go check out our related explainer on effectively overcoming challenges. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep growing.